Hi everyone, welcome to the How to Nominate webinar series for the New South Wales Training Awards. We've got Amanda from Training Services New South Wales, we've got Liam, 2017 Vocational Student of the Year, and also a vet ambassador for the last couple of years and a great vet ambassador. And we've got Megan from 1300 Apprentice. Megan has put through so many nominations for the awards. Megan's going to provide some expert advice as well. So it's great having Liam and Megan on board. Today's webinar is focused on how to gather supporting documentation for an application to the New South Wales Training Awards. And so just to give that context, you've already pretty well done the whole application. The nominator would have filled in the comments field, the individual would have put in their responses to each of the criteria, and now you're at the end of the application where you actually upload supporting documents to the actual application. So that's our focus today. We're just trying to give some practical guidance and advice just to make this a bit easier in terms of when you're gathering information. So we've actually gathered we've compiled a few questions. I'm just going to read out the question and then we'll address it as we go through. So question number one, what type of supporting documentation do you need to gather for an application to the New South Wales Training Awards? Look, the best way to answer this question is to divide it in two. There are mandatory attachments, and I'll deal with those first, and then there are optional attachments, and we'll deal with those second. But just before we go into those two, there's just a couple of things to keep in mind. When you put an application together, you must include at least 2 documents to any application. That's just the minimum required. And so you have to have 2 attachments. Always keep in mind that the selection criteria is the key focus of any application. It's the attachments adding value and they're just supporting it, but they're not the key focus. The key focus is the selection criteria. And look, the last thing just to keep in mind when you're putting an attachment to an application, if you attach a document or a video or a photo, you have to reference it in the actual selection criteria. Otherwise, the judging panel, when they get to the attachments, won't quite know what they're looking at. For Apprentice of the Year, Trainee of the Year, or Vocational Student of the Year, you have to include evidence that the actual individual has completed or they're going to complete their training within the eligibility period. Now, there are any number of different types of documents that you can include to prove this, and I'm going to go through these now. You only have to attach one of these, but it's really important. This is a mandatory requirement if you're nominating an apprentice, a trainee, or a vocational student. So you can attach their proficiency certificate, that's issued by Training Services New South Wales. You can attach their completion certificate. Once again, that's issued by Training Services New South Wales. Or you can attach, and this sounds a little bit complicated, but it's a competency-based completion agreement. I'll just briefly explain what that is. This is an agreement between the individual and the employer. If you get a signed agreement, you can attach that as evidence that you actually the nominee is actually within the eligibility period. Any other completion documentation, early completion documentation, you can attach qualification certificates from RTOs, just transcripts of results from RTOs you can attach. But I think probably the best thing you can do is just get a letter of endorsement from the student's RTO, which just identifies the qualification that they're doing and the nominal completion date that they think that's going to complete, so that you just make sure that the person's eligible within the period. So they're the mandatory requirements for apprentice, trainee, vocational student. If you're going to nominate a school-based apprentice or trainee, you have to provide evidence of the qualification that they're actually doing. Once again, probably the easiest way to do that, get a letter of endorsement from their RTO that just identifies the qualification and the nominal completion date that they'll finish their training. If you're going to nominate a vet in school student, you have to provide evidence of the skill set or the units of competency they're doing as part of their vet in schools program. And this is just, once again, I know I'm sounding like a stuck record, but a letter of endorsement from the RTO that just identifies that skill set or those units of competency and the nominal end date of the training. And if you're going to nominate a vet trainer or a vet teacher for the training awards, there's no mandatory requirement, but you still have to put those two minimum attachment requirements. So that's the mandatory ones. Look, before I go on to the optional ones, I just want to bring Megan in. Megan, just what evidence do you normally attach to an application to show that an individual is going to complete their training within that eligibility period?
Andrew, you said it so well. But what I do, it's exactly right what you said. But what I do is basically Attach the evidence from the nominee's registered training organisation to show that they've completed or expected to complete the training component within the New South Wales Training Awards eligibility period. As you said, it could be the qualification if they've completed, or a letter from that registered training organisation stating that the nominee is expected to complete the training within the eligibility period. And while you're there, maybe you could ask for a reference from that registered training organisation to include with the supporting documentation at the same time, killing two birds with one stone.
Two birds with one stone, absolutely. Thanks, Megan. Look, they're the mandatory requirements, and it's just the ones that you have to address. What we'll do now is we'll move on to the optional attachments. So these are the attachments that you can put up on any application that you submit to the awards. First up, look, any certificates, any prizes that the individual may have received, things like sporting awards, community service awards, maybe a recognition achievement from their employer, but just making sure that when you put up these certificates and prizes that you reference it in criterion 1 under career and study achievements in the actual selection criteria. So that's really important. A copy of their resume, it's really good, but just remember there are some limits. We will get to the page limits a little bit later in this webinar, but there are some limits. So if you're going to put someone's resume up, maybe just leave it as just a one-page summary. You don't want this great big resume just filling up all of your actual page limit space. References or letters of support from trainers, from teachers, from employers, from host employers. References are great, so they're really good attachments to include. And action photos are fantastic to include. Photos speak 1,000 words. So it's great to put up photos of someone maybe in their workplace, maybe on the off-job component of their training. Just keep in mind though, if you're going to attach a photo, you actually have to meet the department's photography brief. Now this is a really, really easy document. It's just 2 pages. You download it from Training Service New South Wales website. I think it's under Training Awards, how to enter online. Just download it and it just gives you just the basic guidelines of how to actually put a headshot or an action shot that you're going to use for an attachment. So photos are great, and you can also attach a video, and a video is a fabulous attachment for an application to the Training Awards. It's not mandatory, you don't have to worry, but if you do have access to some video production equipment, or if the individual has access, or the RTO has some stuff, a little short, sharp 2-3 minute video just showing the applicant, talking about their vocational pathway, talking about why they're being nominated, great attachment to put up for the New South Wales Training Awards. So the optional kind of attachments that you can include as part of an application. So look, before we go any further, I want to bring Liam in. Liam, look, I know it's a long time ago. It was 2017, vocational student year, but just can you remember the attachments that went up as part of your application?
I think with mine, and I didn't put a whole heap in, to be honest with you, which is something I regret. I think the more you can put in there, the better, personally, because the reason I say that is I've sat on the other side now, doing some judging and so forth. And I think the beauty of having those attachments within the application is it prompts questions. So often as I look at those applications, as they come through, I look at what's on there and I go, oh, okay, I wonder, what they were doing within that, community service. I wonder what they were doing, within that. And I'd make notes and I'd bring that up in the interview. And I think what that does is it opens that door into the conversation of other components, which, really highlight the achievements of the person. So that is something definitely I think is really important.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, I just want to pick up on something you said there, Liam, because I want to put you on the spot again. I mean, you've kind of gone through the process, but like you said, you've been on judging panels, so you know both sides of the awards. If you were to say nominate someone yourself, if you were to nominate someone for Vocational Student of the Year, say, what attachments do you think you'd include in an application that you think would be the most important, most viable applicants that, say, a judging panel likes to see?
Yeah, look, I love references, and a written reference says a lot. So I think they're really important. So whether that's from employers, from teachers and trainers, whether it's from a community group you're involved with, I think they speak 1,000 words. But if someone's willing to sit down and write something for you, I think that says a lot, that they're willing to take that time to endorse you. So I do put a lot of value in those. Look, pictures are great, obviously, because it paints a picture. It gives you that real, an idea of what's happening out there. It's always a nice thing. The variety in them is obviously I know there's a limit on what you can put in, but a bit of variety, a bit of everything is really important. So.
Fantastic. Look, thanks, mate. And look, Megan, I might ask you the question too. I mean, what optional attachments would you normally kind of include with an application?
Well, you only have up to 5 attachments. So, and one of these are going to be the mandatory evidence that you need to attach. So you need to pick strategically. I always ask the nominee to send all the documents that they have, everything that they're proud of, that highlight their achievements. And then I only select the very best of what they've given me. Sometimes I get a second opinion. I get other people to look at it and see what people really love, what they gel to. It could be anything. It could even be a newspaper article or something that they've done that no one's even seen before, that they just pull out of their pile of things that they've got at home. I also contact the relevant organisations or individuals that have been a part of that nominee's journey to ask, if they would consider writing a reference, like you all said. And again, I only pick the best references. You might get 4 references. So you want to pick the very best so you can add other things in with them, just to give it a little bit more variety. You don't want 4 references saying sometimes almost the same thing. You always need to include action photos. I agree with that one, of the nominee, preferably in their workplace or in their industry relating to their qualification or their course, what they're doing. And you can also include, like you said, the nominee doing community work or something inspirational as well. So there's so many different things you could include in there, but I always let the nominee go and do their digging and come back and give me what they've got and go through it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Megan. And look, we'll keep going on. Like I said, we've compiled some questions. So I'll go through the questions that we've pulled together and just we'll go and answer them as we go. Now, question number 2. Who do you need to contact to get endorsement letters and other supporting documentation? Well, there's about 5 key people that you need to think about contacting. First of all, it's the individual themselves. You need to ask them for things like any copies of certificates or prizes they may have won, and maybe some photos of trophies they've won even. Just making sure that those really do relate to the application, and also maybe asking them for a copy of their resume, but once again, a stripped down version, maybe just a single page version of the resume. Their RTO, look, remembering you may be their teacher or trainer, so you may be the RTO, but you need to contact their RTO maybe if you want to get a reference letter or a letter of support from their teacher or their trainer, maybe that letter of endorsement that identifies their qualification and when they're going to finish, a copy of their qualification certificate, transcript of results, action photos of them on the job training. So it's their RTO is a key person to contact. Training Services New South Wales. Training Services New South Wales actually issue proficiency certificates, they issue completion certificates, and they issue requests for competency-based completion forms. So if you need one of those as evidence, you may need to contact, or the individual may need to contact Training Services New South Wales. Their employer, once again, a reference, a letter of support, like Liam was saying before, they're really, really powerful attachments. So maybe contact their employer. That could come from a supervisor or a workplace mentor, but really just telling the story of that person and how great they are. And of course, any action photos of them in the workplace will come from the employer. And the community. If the individual's really, really involved in their community, maybe a letter of support from a leader of that community saying how good they are and what they're doing within the community. Once again, great attachment to include. So look, I wouldn't mind going back to Megan and once again, just going over those key people. Megan, when you're putting together a kind of an application, how many people would you normally contact when you're doing that gathering process? Do you put it all onto the student to get it, or are you going out contacting people as well to bring in all of this documentation that you sift through and decide on?
Well, I put a lot of that responsibility onto the nominee to collect the documents, because most of them are in their care. They already have a lot of things that they can show me that are really worth looking at least, or if not including. I also contact 3 other people most of the time, and that is, or up to 3 people, I should say. The nominee's trainer from the training organisation, so we can get a reference and get maybe some other supporting documents they might have. They might have other things that we didn't think about. Some other newspaper articles that they had that they'd achieved things previously with. Also, the workplace supervisor. It's always great to get some feedback from them, first-hand information from people that are working close by with them. And if they're at school still, the person that they deal with at the school, it might be the year advisor, the careers advisor, or even the principal. In some cases, they might be kind enough to write a reference explaining the highlights of that person at school. And it's not just what they're doing at school, it could be their sporting achievements and other community things that are relating to school, which can be really helpful. It's best, in my opinion, for the nominator to contact those last three people, only because you can sort of explain what you're trying to achieve to get better results. You can sort of say what you're looking for in that reference. And I also try and visit that nominee in the workplace to get some additional high quality action photos, of them at work, in their PPE, their personal protective equipment, in their uniform, basically doing their job, really painting that picture like Liam said.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Megan. So look, we'll move on to the third question that we've compiled, and it's this: is there a limit on the amount of supporting information you can attach to an application? Well, Megan's already pointed this out. There is a limit. You can only have a combined attachment page limit of 5 pages, so it's pretty small. So. And the maximum file size for each attachment is 5 megabytes. You can put up PDFs and JPEGs, but just keeping in mind, if you exceed that 5-page limit, only the first 5 pages will be assessed by the panel. So even all of the page 6 onwards, not even going to be looked at. So really make sure you just keep that page limit in stock. So in a way, there's a minimum and a maximum limit. You must have 2 attachments. You can't have more than 5. So it's like Megan said, you're probably going to have to decide once you gather all of this information, which are the key attachments that you want to put up. So yeah, there's definitely a limit. Another question that we got in is, will I strengthen my application to the New South Wales Training Awards by adding supporting documents? You absolutely will. Supporting documents really do add value to an application to the Training Awards, but keep in mind all the time that it's a selection criteria. It's the individual's responses to the selection criteria that is the focus of the application. The attachments really are just, they give it strength, they give it a bit of validity, but it's not the key focus. So look, I might go back, Megan, to you and just ask, when how many supporting documents would you normally include with an individual's application? Now, I'm just asking this because I'm wondering, do you push it right out to 5? Or sometimes will you maybe put 2 or 3? Do you quaver? Does it depend on the individual, or do you always go right out to 5?
Well, you need to include 2, but I always do 5, no matter what. I will dig until I get that 5th one, but it's not hard. I usually sometimes have to go through 100 things to find that 5, which can be quite difficult sometimes. And it can be a little bit stressful trying to pick the best thing, which is it's kind of funny when you're thinking about it. They're all positive things that you're looking through, and trying to find those 5 winning supporting documents can be pretty hard when you've got a lot. So yeah, just remember, carefully pick those best 5 supporting documents that you have.
Fantastic, thanks, Megan. And look, that's pretty well it. That brings us to the end of this webinar on how to gather supporting documentation. Look, if I could summarise it, it's probably in 4 main points. You must include at least 2 attachments to any application to the New South Wales Training Awards. That's critical. You can't attach more than 5 attachments, and if you do, only the first 5 pages are going to be assessed. Always keep that in mind. The selection criteria has to be the focus of the application, not the attachments. The attachments just give it value and add value. And if you do attach a document, a photo or a video to an application, always reference it in the selection criteria so the judging panel knows why it's there and gets a sense of its context within the application. Look, we've come to the end, but I wouldn't mind just handing over to Liam. Look, any concluding thoughts on what you feel like, why it's important to have these supporting documents, and just any concluding comments you want to share with everyone?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's really well been covered that, supporting documents, whilst not the most important thing, are very important. I think it really does paint that full picture. It rounds out an application really well. It gives the judges and the people who are looking at it something to think about and more areas for them to probe into. So I think it is really important. Due diligence, give it the time. It's well and truly worth it. So have a dig around, talk to people. I'm sure if someone's considering to nominate for this, they're probably willing to help you out doing it too. So reach out, ask people for help. I know self-promotion is not always easy, so do ask those around you for their opinion and what they think you should do.
Fantastic, thanks, Liam. And Megan, any concluding thoughts on gathering supporting documentation?
Just one more thing, and that is to prepare in advance and give yourself and your nominee plenty of time to complete and lodge that nomination before the deadline. In my experience, it's always the supporting documentation and often references from third parties that I'm chasing closer to that deadline. So do things properly, take your time, and don't leave things to the last minute.
Fantastic. Thanks, Megan. And look, thanks everyone for joining us. It's been great. And that's a webinar, how to get the supporting documentation, just focusing on just trying to make the application process to the New South Wales Training Awards just that little bit easier. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.